Stacey.
And I'm Kyle.
And this week on PSYCOW we have Eric Stanze, who is the president of Wicked Pixel Cinema and also a writer of a blog at FearNet called Surviving Cinema.
This week, Stacey talks to Eric on her own. I would have loved to be there, but I just couldn't make it. We were broken down in a van like 2 hours from my house, outside of a crack house, and that was by accident. We weren't there on purpose. We weren't getting crack.
Yes.
Yeah, so Stacey's on her own this week, and she does just a lovely job.
Oh, thanks!
But yeah, Eric seems like an awesome guy, and I hope to have him back on. I sent him a message saying you need to come back on so I can, talk to you as well. So without further ado, let's get right in the interview with Eric.
So how did you get started with film?
I don't think that there was a moment where I had some kind of a big break or came to some, epiphany that this was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I think that it was there at a very young age. I had an interest in making films probably starting in grade school. I was just fascinated with it. I maybe didn't completely understand that that's what I wanted to do, but I was fascinated by films at an early age. And just as the years went on and I grew to understand more of what went on behind the scenes in making movies, I became just as fascinated with that side of things as I was fascinated with the movies themselves. So it's something that from the earliest memories I have, it was already growing inside me. So if there was a moment professionally where I kind of crossed a line, I know that I was 16 years old, and a friend of mine who was involved in film and video production, he knew what I was interested in, and he asked me to come out and basically function as an intern, be low man on the totem pole of a video about the dangers of drunk driving. And I remember being 16 years old, and I was on a set. I was the cue card boy, an unpaid cue card boy on a drunk driving PSA, and that was probably, if memory serves, that was the first time that I was actually doing anything on any kind of a professional level. But even before that, when I was growing up in Pittsburgh, I would gather friends together and I'd take control of my family's Super 8 film camera, and we'd make little shorts in the backyard and that kind of stuff. So it really dates back many, many, many years. It's consumed the vast majority of my life.
That's very awesome. You said the drunk driving video, and for me, did you get to watch that video after you did all the cue cards and everything?
I never saw the finished video, actually.
Really? Oh my god. Those videos, when I first started driving, they made me watch one, and I never wanted to drive again. Ever. Just for what they put in there. It was awful. So,
yeah, we didn't shoot any, gory stuff or anything like that, but it was mostly actors on a stage talking, if I'm remembering right. It would have been a little more interesting if we had done all the terror on the highway, blood and gore stuff.
The drunk guy that flew through his windshield and got pinned between his car and a tree, those things.
Exactly. Yeah, that would have been way more exciting.
Exactly. Who would you say are your biggest influences, or is there any particular film that you can think of that really influenced you to say, this is what I want to do?
Well, because my interest in filmmaking dates back so many years into such a young age, the influences there are many influences, and they're quite disparate. I know that the first film that really caught my attention was Star Wars. And so I became fascinated by, how did they make those creatures? How did they, who were the people who made all those masks to make all those, creatures in the movie? And I was also influenced a lot by the Muppets, believe it or not, because at a very young age, like most children, I was fascinated by the Muppets. And I saw a behind-the-scenes program that showed what the puppeteers did just below the camera line, the frame line.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw what it took to put on the show, that became more fascinating than the Muppets themselves. So I know that wanting to get into making movies, or at least having an interest in what went on behind the scenes. I know a big part of that was the Muppets when I was a kid. And then when I got older and I actually started making my own student level films, probably Sam Raimi, Evil Dead, and probably Nightmare on Elm Street, pretty much the classics. I know there was a little bit of Toxic Avenger thrown in there, and Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When I was very young, those were the movies that I was most struck by as a horror fan in my teen years, and it was probably those movies that I was trying to imitate the most when I was a teenager in the backyard with the Super 8mm film camera with my friends trying to make our own movies.
Those are the best ones too, because those ones, to me, that's what I grew up on as well. And watching those, and I know that you have a very big influence on practical effects as well, so seeing practical effects automatically, I'm like, that's amazing. If I could do anything, that would be what I want to do. But, The Scare Game and Fine Art are two films credited to be your first, which were in the early 90s. Have you noticed the big change from making those films back then to making films today?
It's as if they were made in two entirely different universes. The Scare Game and the Fine Art were essentially student films. They never were intended to be seen by anyone. I didn't make them thinking, okay, I'll make this movie and release it, and I'll make my create my first footprint as a horror filmmaker. There was nothing like that in my mind. I thought we would make these movies and enjoy the experience and get some education, and maybe, a dozen people would see them. And then it was after both of those movies were finished that just through happenstance, more than anything, I ended up having a discussion with the head of a home video distributor about these movies, and he asked to see them, and then he offered me a distribution contract for them. So they became quote-unquote professional product well after they were finished. The first movie that I made that I tend to refer to as the movie that I tend to refer to as my first professional film was Savage Harvest. And I'm using the term professional loosely there, but that was the first movie that I went into knowing that when it was finished, it would be seen by a lot of people, that it would be released to home video. We actually had a home video distribution contract all set up before we started shooting that movie. So those movies were very, The Scare Game and Fine Art, first and foremost, they were just student exercises. They weren't intended to be seen by anyone. So that's the biggest difference between then and now. And probably more importantly, though, is just the Scare Game and the Fine Art, and then Savage Harvest were all kind of made in that era where I was still trying to find a voice, and I was more making movies trying to imitate filmmakers that I admired. And it wasn't until after Savage Harvest, starting around Ice from the Sun, was when I really started to, I think, find my own voice as a filmmaker. So that's another big difference between those past ancient movies and the movies that I'm making now.
How did Wicked Pixel Cinema start out? Did it start out with Savage Harvest, or did you start from before that?
Well, we had finished Savage Harvest. It had been released, and that made it feel like I had some momentum going. It made it feel like, okay, there's a lot moving forward. There are a lot of people on board with what I'm trying to do, making movies, and it was clear that Savage Harvest wasn't going to be something that was just released and then, I sort of dust off my hands and say, okay, I haven't done with the filmmaking thing, I'll go find something else to do. Right. It was clear after Savage Harvest that I was just going to be, continuing doing that and hopefully improving, and it was already in my blood and there was no getting out of it at that point. So Wicked Pixel Cinema was formed right around the time that Savage Harvest was being released, and it was formed to create the first movie under that banner, which was Ice from the Sun.
Well, I have to ask about Savage Harvest going back. some of the effects, that's what I loved about it. As soon as I saw it, I was like, this is what makes film, is seeing these little gritty effects and everything, even though they are low budget. Were you directly responsible for the idea of the kills in that movie?
If memory serves, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think the kills pretty much are as they appear in the screenplay, and I read the screenplay.
Awesome.
And I do remember my thinking about the gory effects in that movie. I was thinking about things like, well, what can be accomplished at this budget level? What can be accomplished without, spending giant piles of money that we don't have? And I remember to a certain degree designing those gore sequences around what I felt like we could accomplish with our limited budget and our limited resources. But then I also know that once we started shooting, Tony Bridges was the special effects artist on that movie. He was able to take effects that were written in kind of let's see if we can get away with this type of mentality, and he was able to just take it up another 10 levels. I felt like we could achieve those special effects at our budget level, and that's why they were written into the script. But then when Tony got a hold of them, he completely impressed me and was able to achieve way more than I thought we would be able to achieve, given the money I gave him that was his budget for effects, and the time that he had to do them. He worked miracles on that movie.
Definitely. And I mean, for how little budget it is, you guys still pulled off everything that, from what it sounds like, you wanted to pull off. So good job with that. And Scrapbook is a film that I've seen on numerous, I don't know about you, but I've gone on Google before, and I don't know why, but I just have to type in, what's the most disturbing movie ever? And I've seen Scrapbook pop up so many times. Are you excited?
I've seen it on a few of those.
Yeah,
I've seen it on a few of those lists.
Are you excited for that title, for being most disturbing?
Oh, I don't mind that at all. That's not something that I'm gonna, turn my back on or whatever. I mean, it basically means that the movie had an impact, and if it has any kind of an impact, even if it impacts the viewer in a way that makes them say, I'm repulsed by this, and I hate the fact that this movie was ever made, that to me is so much better than the movie being ignored or just forgotten about or not having any impact at all. And I think Scrapbook has had, probably equal amounts of people watching it and saying, this is brilliant, I can't believe this was done at this budget level, and praising it. And then there are equal number of people saying, this is absolutely horrifying, and these people shouldn't have ever made this movie, and blah, blah, blah. And, there's anger and angry mobs and pitchforks and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, definitely.
And that, to me, that's all fine. I would much rather see any of that than make a movie and have everybody just kind of yawn and forget about it the next day.
Definitely. And I mean, I remember watching it for the first time and just seeing how it started out. I was like, this film's going to be gritty, it's going to be gross, and I can just tell by my stomach turning that I'm going to have a reaction to this film. And that's what I love about film like that. And it does contain heavy subject matter, and it fills you in that world of disgusting feeling. I'm sure that's exactly what you wanted everybody to feel, was just how demented and gross this world is.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the goals was to make it as, if you're attacking that kind of subject matter, my personal opinion is it would be irresponsible to present it in any other way. If you're presenting that kind of subject matter, it should be in every way that you possibly can be presenting it as unpleasant and repugnant, and you don't want to. That's some heavy subject matter, and you don't want to glorify it. Mm-hmm. And so I just I remember feeling like anything. It's just a movie. You can't come anywhere close to having the movie create a world or a feeling or anything that comes anywhere close to reality, especially when you're dealing with emotionally charged subject matter that is that emotionally charged. but I wanted to use every trick that I could to try to make a cinematic representation of that unsettling feeling, and on a physical level, on a gore level, on the level of verbal and emotional abuse, just anything that I could throw in there as a tool to make the movie as unsettling as possible. That was the goal. So if that's the reaction people had to it, then yes, I would consider that a successful venture.
It worked. Emily Hack really shines in that film, and I'm saying her last name right, correct?
That's correct, Emily Hack.
And this was her first role. Was there something in particular that made her stand out for that role?
I think working on any film that is unconventional, any film that goes to extremes, and I'm saying extremes like what Scrapbook has in it, or extremes just on a creative level, just being very unique or having some level of artistic daring to it. When you do anything that is not the norm, you run the risk of alienating potential collaborators. People don't tend to like to go out on thin ice. They like to do stuff that they've seen before, that they can feel confident in, that, kind of fits into a realm that they would consider comfortable. So asking anyone on any movie that is trying to be unique or trying to be inventive or trying to present something that is unexpected, you have to audition for attitude as well as acting ability. If the actors are not on the same page as the filmmakers, if they're not willing to be a participant in the creation of that movie, then they're probably not a right fit. They're not appropriate for the part. Someone willing to just show up and do what's on the page and say their lines, but they're not emotionally invested or completely, or maybe they just don't get it, what you're trying to achieve. That's a good reason to not work with that person. But Emily was able to do both. She was able to come in prepared and do what she needed to do to bring the character to life, but she also believed in the movie, understood what we were trying to do with the movie, and she became not just a member of the cast, but a participant in the creation of the movie. So
definitely, and I mean, you went on to work with her more and more down the road, as well as many other people. Did you come into contact with them the same way you did Emily? Just kind of came along and they worked out perfect, or did you have references? How did you get along with them?
What I like in each movie that I make, I like there to be a mix of old and new faces. I don't like the idea of making a movie and everyone in the cast happens to be someone that I've worked with before. Just like the idea of working with a cast of completely new people who I've never worked with before, it's not as appealing as kind of mixing it up. I like to see fresh faces mixed in with the old, reliable collaborators. So if we audition people, we definitely take recommendations. If we, send out the feelers and somebody comes back and says, oh, you should look at this actor from over here, he would be right for your movie, or whatever it is that we do to collect a cast, then we work with them, and sometimes it clicks and you think, wow, I can't wait to work with this person again. And then other times it ends up being, for whatever reason, just a one-time thing, or they move on to do other things and have other priorities in their life, and they don't want to act in movies anymore, so you end up not working with them or whatever. But I think that it's best to be open-minded when casting, and not just go into each project knowing I'm going to work with these 10 people who I've worked with before. And I like bringing in new people and kind of mixing them into the group and see if they click into place or not.
That's awesome. And Ratline is your latest film, and probably my favorite next to Scrapbook. How did the story come about for Ratline?
Well, we Jason Christ and I had written a film called Seizure, and actually, I think your last episode, you interviewed Adrienne King, and she was attached to the cast of Seizure, along with a few other genre notables, and we wrote that together and made a lot of strides in getting the financing to do that on a bigger budget, and then it just didn't happen, and the project fell apart. And Ratline ended up being a plan B. Just, okay, if we don't get that money by this date, I remember we set a cutoff date, and we were like, if we don't feel confident that the budget for Seizure is coming in by this date, we're going to go ahead and launch into this plan B project, which was Ratline. And the Seizure never firmed up, and so we ended up going with Ratline, which is actually now, I think, the best way it could have gone, because the screenplay for Ratline, I think, is way better than the screenplay for Seizure. I would not even be interested in going back and seeing if Seizure was something that I could resurrect and get going again. I think that both Jason and I, as writers, he co-wrote Seizure with me, and he co-wrote Ratline with me as well. I think we've advanced considerably since writing Seizure, and neither of us feel that it is up to our current standards. So maybe it's a good thing that Seizure never got off the ground. But going into Ratline, I'd go into each movie with a kind of an understanding that there's something that I want to experience as a filmmaker or achieve as a filmmaker, and I try to achieve or experience something new with each movie. And so with Ratline, I kind of was looking at it like I wanted to try mixing that crime thriller, maybe giallo type genre film, mix it with almost like an X-Files style occult story, and then see if I can't blend all of that together and make it really gritty and definitely something that would have impact. And I felt like if I did all of that, it would just be something original. It would be something that isn't already out there, for horror fans to pick up. Horror fans, a very common complaint is that what they tend to see are cookie cutter movies, the safe bets. If it's not a bigger budgeted remake, often they're complaining about the lower budget stuff that just kind of, mimics the bigger budget stuff. And so I felt like if I took those elements and tried to blend them together, if I succeeded, then it would, at the very least, we would have a movie that doesn't look like anything else that's out there.
And you guys succeeded very well in that, because Ratline, it's definitely my favorite from Wicked Pixel, because it's so different, and not only from Wicked Pixel, but it's different from everything else out there. Like the storyline, you've got almost like different stories within each other, and it's definitely, but it all comes together at the same time. And Frank Logan was played by Jason Christ, and he can pull off the dark side, which I was shocked to see, because he's such a nice, loving guy.
Yes.
Did you know from the start that Jason was going to be Frank?
Well, first of all, you're right. It's an interesting part for him to play, because he does pull off the dark, sinister bad guy very well. And if you know him in normal life, he can be goofy, and he's definitely very
loving,
loving and fun and joking around type of guy. So he's not like, if you're writing this sinister character, he's not going to be the first actor who jumps into your brain, I don't think. But as Jason and I were writing it, I think that I had him in mind to play it more or less the entire time that we were writing. And I think Jason was more or less focused on the writing and not really thinking about playing that part, or I don't even think that he was thinking about being in the movie at all. I think he assumed that he would be, but that was for later. That was something that was to be discussed later when when we finally landed on a draft of the screenplay that we were happy with. So when we got a draft that we were happy with, and I finally, officially more or less talked to Jason and asked him if he'd be interested in playing Frank Logan. and I believe he was a little bit caught off guard by that just because he hadn't thought about it. So, and then there was some backlash because a lot of people who were working on the movie with me were like, "Are you serious? You want Jason to play that? This is this bad guy that's supposed to be menacing and sinister and devious, and you want to cast fun-loving Jason Christ in there?" And I was like, "Yes, trust me. I know that he can do it, but also I didn't want to do the character as an ex-Nazi, which means you have a very real danger of falling into cliche and having, a bad guy who just looks like 1,000 other Nazi bad guys that you've seen in 1,000 other movies." And I wanted to make sure that I didn't fall into that trap. And I knew that Jason would not only be able to pull it off, but he would have an understanding of the character that would prevent me, prevent the movie from falling into that trap of Nazi bad guy cliches.
Definitely. I mean, he even had the eyes and everything to look like this nasty guy, and I was like, I've never seen Jason look like that. So it was an excellent choice, and good job to both of you guys for that decision. But no problem. You also make an appearance in Ratline, and you have this, I don't want to say amazing uniform, but it was put together very, very nicely. Did you guys make those?
Oh, the Nazi uniform that the bad guys are wearing? That I have to give the credit to Trevor Williams. He was in charge of production design and costume design on this movie. And it was Trevor Williams and then Jim Ware and myself doing the research to make sure that we knew what we wanted the uniform to look like. And then because we're a very low budget movie, we couldn't just run out and rent one. We couldn't just run out and buy one. What Trevor did was he essentially scoured the earth looking for all of the elements that would be stitched together to make the Nazi uniform. And he ordered from, there are parts in that uniform that are, I think he purchased parts of that uniform right here in St. Louis. And I think parts of that uniform came from as far away as China. But to keep his costs low, he just pieced it together, finding all the bits and pieces that he could buy cheapest from all over the planet, shipped everything in, and then he assembled it. And the big secret to that is that we only had enough money to put together one Nazi uniform. So that is why you never see the three main Nazi guys who wear the uniform. You never see them in the same shot because we're all wearing the same uniform. In fact, you only see the three of us in one shot at one point in the movie, and it's a composite. We did that with post-production trickery because we did not have enough money to buy three of those uniforms. It was that low budget of a film.
But it turned out really great, and I loved Ratline, so I'm hoping that anybody that does listen to PSYCOW goes out and checks out Ratline. But recently Scrapbook got a VHS release, and I know that I'm a huge VHS collector. I don't know if you still have VHS. What made you decide to go with that release?
Well, a company called Vultra Video actually approached us about doing the VHS release. I had not considered doing anything like that. I have a select few special VHS movies in my collection, but for the most part, they all have gone away and been replaced by DVD. I didn't have the foresight to realize that VHS would have this resurgence, and I could, make $3,000 by just waiting 10 years and selling all my old tapes. So I've only got a handful of VHS tapes left in my collection, and I didn't understand how big the VHS craze had gotten. That there was this VHS collectors community that was really, really into this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand how big that was. So it would have never occurred to me to do a VHS release of Scrapbook or any of my other movies. But the guys that run Vulture Video, they contacted us because they're huge fans of Scrapbook, and they were doing the series of VHS limited edition releases, and they essentially just approached us about doing it. And after I considered their offer for a bit, then I said, sure, let's do it. So it was really, they set it in motion, and I was more or less just along for the ride on that. And I don't know how much Vulture Video wants me to talk about this. I don't want to give away any of their secrets,
no, that's
but
fine.
there will be more. There will be. I can't go into detail, but I can hint there will be more VHS. Some of my other movies will be getting the same VHS treatment in the near future through Vulture Video, so everybody needs to keep their eyes open for that too.
I'm excited now. Not only do you work as president of Wicked Pixel, you also work for writing in FearNet, Surviving Cinema. How did you get involved with FearNet?
I think, I can't remember how long ago this was, but I know that there was a website called Monsters at Play that was run by Lawrence Raffel, and he did a couple of reviews of my movies that were positive, and I believe, I'm remembering right, the way it went was that Jeremy Wallace, the producer on Scrapbook and Eyes from the Sun and Ratline, Jeremy contacted Lawrence just to thank him for doing, for giving us the press and the good review and everything. And we all just kind of hit it off, and Jeremy and Lawrence became good friends, and then Lawrence just started to show more and more interest in what we were doing as filmmakers. And when we were making Savage Harvest 2, which Jason Christ directed, Lawrence actually flew out and visited us on set so that he could, write up a piece about Savage Harvest 2 for Monsters at Play. And we just kind of kept this professional association / friendship going. And then Lawrence was hired by FearNet, and now he's a bigwig at FearNet.com. And shortly after that happened, he just made an offer to me that was, okay, if you want to do this quasi-weekly blog, just basically turn in 4 blogs a month for FearNet, we would like to have you join the team. And I think that was back in 2007. And I was immediately interested. I mean, I absolutely wanted to do it. I remember, though, that I was really, really busy at the time, and I remember they offered me a certain amount of compensation for the work, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. I'll take that. But I didn't respond right away. I just was like really, really busy. So it was like 3 or 4 weeks went by and I hadn't responded. And then they came back and said, well, all right, we'll pay you more to do that, because they thought I was, I guess, they thought I was trying to, be a hardcore negotiator or something. So, but eventually I said, yes, I will do it. And I've been doing it, writing a blog for them 4 times a month since sometime in 2007, and then I've contributed other articles outside of the blog as well in the past. So it's been a very good experience working for FearNet. I've enjoyed it, and Lawrence is one of my favorite bosses who I've ever had in my life. He's a very, very good guy, and I thoroughly enjoy working for him.
That's awesome. I think, I don't know if he's going to be there, but Horror Hound in Cincinnati, I know FearNet is presenting it, I guess, this year. So maybe he'll be out there.
Oh, okay.
I'll look for him.
Yes.
Another film I'm hearing, I've heard buzz about this film for a little while, but now I'm just picking up that it's getting released and everything, is We Are What We Are, in which you directed Second Unit. Can you give any details about that film?
Well, probably the most important detail I could give is right now it's screening at Sundance and getting a really good response, so I'm very happy about that. Other than the screenings at Sundance, there is no information yet about release dates or a distributor who's going to release it, but it should get at least a limited theatrical release.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and it was, I got involved in that because it's directed by Jim Mickle, who did Stakeland, and I was the second unit director on Stakeland as well, and I guess I did something right because he was eager to have me back for We Are What We Are. And I know that it's a remake of a Mexican film that, from what I understand, went over very well in, I think, 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the original, the Mexican version of We Are What We Are. I think it's an outstanding work. And I think one of the strengths of Jim Mickles' remake, or a reimagining, as he calls it, is that he didn't go about it like, well, I'm going to do a shot-for-shot remake. He basically took a handful of thematic elements from the original and then built his own story around it. And what I have seen some people saying, oh, the Jim Mickle version blows the original Mexican version out of the water, and it's so much better. And I'm happy that it's getting that kind of positive attention, but I tend to see the two movies as being companion pieces. They aren't really, it's hard to compare one to the other and say one is better than the other just because they're just different enough.
Right.
So I would recommend, if anybody out there, any horror fans listening, check out the original We Are What We Are, and then keep your eyes peeled for the release date of Jim Mickles' new version, which should see a release sometime later this year.
That would be awesome. And it's just We Are What We Are. It's nothing for the Mexican version. Yeah, all right. Awesome. It's just called We Are What We Are for the Mexican version?
Yeah, they're both titled the same.
All right, because I'm going to probably get off here and buy it if I can find it. So what's next for Wicked Pixel?
Well, you're catching me in a time of transition. I don't really know what's next for Wicked Pixel. Personally, I feel like I've rounded a certain corner with Ratline, and want to make sure that I don't, settle into any kind of a pattern that I would find unfulfilling. And so I'm more or less, in terms of what I do next and where I take my career, I'm trying very hard to just keep those options as open as possible. So there may be something next, maybe something else that comes from the Wicked Pixel banner, or it may be something where I completely jump off of that ride and do something else for a while and make movies under a different banner, or make movies for other production companies for a while. It's really a big question mark at this time. And mostly what I've been doing since the release of Ratline, more than anything, is writing. And I've developed multiple projects that exist anywhere from detailed story treatments up to first draft screenplay.
Awesome.
And I haven't pursued with any real fuel yet. I haven't pursued getting any of those projects off the ground. I've just been enjoying exploring the creative options and kind of developing these multiple stories to see which one I fall in love with the most. And I'm sure that I'm pretty close to, within the next few months, there's going to be one of them that kind of surfaces as the one I am most attached to. And when that finally happens, I'll probably take it around to other companies and see if other companies are interested in it. So that the next thing I do, hopefully, will be done for a different production company and not for my own. That would be my desire at this stage of my career. But that doesn't mean that Wicked Pixel Cinema is going to go away forever. It's just I don't know what the future is for it at this time.
That's awesome. I mean, that'd be awesome to see somebody else take your screenplay and see what they do with it. I'm always interested in seeing something like that. So congratulations with all the projects you have with the We Are What We Are. You did the Stake Land, you said, and you've got all this writing, and plus you got FearNet going on. I know you're a busy guy, so we'll definitely look out for anything and everything that has your name attached to it.
I appreciate that.
No problem. And the last thing we like to do on the show is called the PSYCOW 8, which is basically like a lightning round of 8 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Okay. And am I keeping these as like one sentence answers if possible? Is that what I'm doing?
You don't have to do that at all. You can think about it. Everybody does. So you're all right. So number 1, what's the scariest movie of all time?
The Changeling with George C. Scott.
Really? That's a different answer that I've heard. Everybody always says The Exorcist.
That would probably be a close second.
That's my scariest movie too. So good job saying something else though. Best movie you've seen in the last 5 years?
Probably the last few David Fincher films would have to fall into that category. And if we're talking more genre-specific stuff, I'd probably go back 5 years and say Moon and District 9.
Oh, both of those are fantastic movies. What's your favorite movie you've worked on so far?
I think because I go into each movie with a different agenda and wanting to experience something or achieve something new with each film, they almost feel like each movie is a film class for me. Can I achieve this thing that I want to achieve, whatever it is? And that makes each experience making each movie very different, and the experience of making it colors the finished movie. I can't just sit back and watch one of my movies and try to enjoy it. All I see are the people that worked on the movie with me. It's all colored by the memories of making the movie. So that's very hard to say. I have an appreciation for all of the movies that I've worked on for very, very different reasons, but I would almost always say that the one that I'm most enthusiastic about is the one that I'll be making next.
Oh, good answer. What's the worst horror movie monster of all time?
Without thinking about it in depth, and because I'm sure I could get obsessive compulsive and come up with a list of like 50 for you, but off the top of my head, I'm just going to throw out probably the bad guy in Shocker, directed by Wes Craven.
Really? That's a different one. What's your cheesy guilty pleasure outside of horror?
I think that's a tough question because my cheesy guilty pleasures are all kind of quasi in the horror genre.
Right.
I mean, if I look at the horror genre, my tastes lean towards, David Cronenberg or George Romero and filmmakers who really utilize all the additional colors on the palette that the horror genre offers and they're trying to do something very special with each movie. And I don't tend to lean towards, the B-movie schlock type stuff. But if I had a guilty pleasure, it would probably be like the drive-in B-movie schlock from the 60s and 70s, like the old Herschel Gordon Lewis gore films and, stuff that was intended to be, that was not intended to be good, but only intended to be entertaining or at least interesting or have some kind of, goofy shock value to it or whatever. So, if it's a ridiculous Herschel Gordon Lewis gore movie or, one of those, bad drive-in films where people are running and screaming from someone in a bad monster suit, or even like, the giant bug movies of the 1950s, that's the kind of stuff that if I'm not sitting down to watch something serious that I want to really appreciate as a fine work of horror cinema, that's the kind of movie that I would be watching as a guilty pleasure.
That's awesome. Those are all good choices. I know there's millions of those type movies, but they're all, if you just want to sit down and relax and have fun with a movie, that's what those movies are for, and that's why I think everybody in the horror world really goes crazy for them, because it's not something you really gotta pay too much attention to.
Yeah, you don't have to overwork your brain on that.
Exactly. What do you think about the rebooted, recycled, and remade horror movies?
I'm not a fan of the concept, which makes me somewhat hypocritical because I'm incredibly enthusiastic about We Are What We Are, which is a remake. In general, it's not something that appeals to me, but then, half the time these the remakes come out, and I don't go see a lot of them, but when I do, sometimes some of them are fairly impressive. Like I did not mind at all the remake of Dawn of the Dead, for example. So I think that the danger there is if someone's making a movie because they love the original and they're using it as source material to inspire them to create something new and special to them, then that's probably okay. That's like adapting a book or something. It's you're as a fan, you're taking someone else's work of art and you're adding to it with your own ingenuity. I think the danger is when a property is simply purchased because someone realizes, well, if we have this title and we crank out this remake and we can get our opening weekend box office and make a quick buck, and they don't really care about making the movie. That's a secondary hassle. Those are the remakes that are destined to infuriate the horror fans of the world, including me.
What's your favorite decade for horror movies?
The 70s. I think that if I had to go in and be specific, I would say for horror movies and movies in general, I think the sweet spot of American cinema is 1968 through 1983, maybe something like that.
Awesome. You got a whole entire section. Is there anything in 68 that you can think of off the top of your head that?
I think that the era kicks off with Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and I really believe that had a ripple effect on the motion picture industry, because it opened a lot of eyes and made people realize that you could make something that was not star-studded, not made in Hollywood. It was a regional film that ended up making a lot of money in theaters and drive-ins coast to coast, and it changed. Not only did it alter the way people thought of zombie movies, and pretty much every zombie movie made after Night of the Living Dead is has Night of the Living Dead to thank for its set of rules and the tone, and it's just a different kind of zombie movie today post Night of the Living Dead. But in terms of the film industry, it was a game changer on that level too, and so that, I believe, is one of the films that kind of kicked off a new exploratory attitude. The ripple effects were found all the way up to bigger budgeted studio films. It's just that people were willing to take more risks and willing to put more trust in the directors and the other filmmakers working on each film. And it wasn't about focus groups and branding a product and what kind of merchandise can we sell afterwards. There was people actually out there trying to make the best movie they can make, and I don't believe that is the case most of the time today. So
I agree with you there, and it's kind of a shame. I mean, I do collect horror stuff and everything like that, but mainly stuff back, like the older stuff and everything, but everything today is...
Yeah, you can find the gems today, but they are, I believe, few and far between, and they certainly don't come out with the quality or the consistency that they did in the 70s. So, if you wanted to even bookend the era, you could probably say that the golden age of American cinema probably started with Night of the Living Dead in 1968. Probably was capped off by Blade Runner in 1982.
Those are good choices.
Things have not been the same.
I agree with you. Everything. I mean, I wasn't even born till 87, but I grew up on everything, in the 80s. That's what my mom told me, the 70s, the 80s, everything from there. My grandparents, I stayed with them a lot, and I was not allowed to watch horror movies unless it was like Frankenstein, Dracula, Nosferatu. Anything like that was fine, but Night of the Living Dead was actually fine as well, but not anything modern or anything of the sort. So those films are what I grew up on, and then being older now and seeing everything that's out there now, I can't stand it, honestly. I mean, I hate to say that there are films here and there that I love, but it's very, very hard nowadays to find something that's going to pack that punch like you said, like Night of the Living Dead did back in the 60s. So, good choices.
Yep.
The last question I have for you is, what is something you've learned from the horror movies?
That's probably the toughest one you've asked all night. Because I have to kind of like evaluate it from the standpoint of a horror fan and as a horror filmmaker. Probably the biggest thing that I've learned and come to appreciate over the years is that the horror genre does offer so many more colors on that palette for filmmakers to use, which can create movies that are far more inventive and far more impactful than what you might find outside of the horror genre. It's ironic because there are a lot of people who think that horror films they're not real movies. There's some side crappy money making thing that they're not real filmmaking. People like to criticize the horror genre, saying it's just one step above porn, and it tends to be just people look down their nose at it a lot. And I think weather those criticisms by just saying, well, I don't care because I like it. I like horror movies. The end of debate. But what I've learned is that it just opens up the universe, and it gives you more to play with narratively and visually. It's the horror genre. It's like other movies maybe give you the black paint, the white paint, and a few shades of blue, and you're stuck with it. And then the horror genre just gives you every possible color to paint with. Your imagination is the only thing that could possibly limit you when you're dealing in the horror genre. So I've just learned that the people who look down their noses at the genre just haven't explored it very much, or refuse to explore it very much. And in fact, the genre offers so much more to the filmmaker who wants to do something really unique and really special.
And I agree with you very much. But I want to say thank you very much, Eric Stanze, for coming on the show. If you can, head over to wickedpixelcinema.com, or is it just Wicked Pixel?
It's wickedpixel.com.
Check out all of his films there and be on the lookout for Scrapbook and We Are What We Are. Scrapbook on VHS, I should say. Thank you very much, Eric, for joining us.
Yep. Thank you, Stacey. It was a pleasure.
Much. I hope you have a good night. That's all for recording.
You too.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming on. It's been awesome. I know I've talked to Joel numerous times about, man, one of these days I'm going to meet Eric Stanze and it's going to be a big deal. And he's like, I know. And I actually talked to Joel and I was like, Eric said he was going to come on our show, and he was like, I bet you're stoked. And I was like, I am so excited about this. You have no idea. It's been so long. So thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, that's very nice of you, but it was fun. I appreciate you giving our movies a little bit of spotlight.
Hey, no
that's
problem.
really kind
Thanks
of you.
for coming on.